Hello and welcome to The Pulse. Hong Kong has a problem with waste, and more particularly solid waste. According to the government, we generate a staggering 6 million tonnes of the stuff each year. Most of it goes to 3 landfills, which are already pretty much at capacity. 2 weeks ago, the government announced it's going to start charging households for waste disposal. More on that in part 2. But first, whether it's elections for legislators or for the chief executive, Beijing seems to be getting actively involved in Hong Kong's democratic process. This does not bode well for what some people see as the ever-shrinking scope of the one country, two systems principle. Following on from the phenomena of busing people from elderly homes to vote in the last Legco election and supplying free seafood dinners to voters, there were also recommendations from a northerly direction on which way to vote in last month's chief executive election. In addition to these accusations of improper intervention, the ICAC recently arrested 72 people for alleged vote rigging during last year's Legco election.
Who knew we had so many IT engineers? Well, perhaps we don't. In last September's Legislative Council election, the number of voters in the Information Technology Functional Constituency almost doubled compared to the previous term, from 6,700 to roughly 12,000. In light of this, 3 individuals, including lawmaker Charles Mok, reported suspected corrupt conduct and vote rigging to the Independent Commission Against Corruption. Last week, the commission arrested 72 individuals who were later released on bail. The anti-corruption gatekeeper disclosed that 4 are believed to be middlemen, while the rest were newly registered electors in the IT functional constituency. Most voted in September's Legco election.
People would be wondering, what is happening? Why is this sort of vote rigging, illegal activities happening in this sector? In fact, I have to say that in that regard, we are actually the victims, because obviously whoever the masterminds are, and these people who are coming in and try to become voters in this particular case, they were not eligible. So they're not even from our sector.
Reportedly, the ineligible voters had received bribes ranging from a few hundred to $1,000. As required by law, the Registration and Electoral Office asks organizations to screen out unqualified members and update their member lists. But Hong says it has become significantly harder to track members over the years.
I think it is the responsibility of the government, especially the REO, to actually review the eligibility of voters. The fact that he joined our association 4 years ago, at that time he was qualified with all experience, doesn't tell us today whether he's still in the industry. He could have become an insurance agent or property agent, right? And we will ask them to update their status when they change, but they don't have the obligation to tell us. So it's very hard for us to basically trace every single member.
Well, with us in the studio are Mark Pinkstone, who was Chief Information Officer for Regina Ip's Chief Executive campaign, and Charles Mok of the Professional Commons. Mark Pinkstone, can I come to you? Now, rather famously, you've written about your experience of the campaign, which you were in the middle of, and you basically were saying, just to paraphrase, that it was a predetermined election, that your candidate, and indeed any other candidate other than Carrie Lam, basically didn't need to bother to be there. Well, what do you base that on?
Basically on the way it was played, I suppose would be the best way of describing it. We went to lots and lots of meetings with different groups, and generally they're all very supportive. You know, there was a good presentation, and yes, many said after the meetings that they would give Regina the support, which was encouraging. And I think that's what kept her in the race, actually, was this background. But then you can see a sort of a twist, and especially when it became public that this invisible hand was being interplayed. Michael Teen actually made a public statement in that regard. And then that was followed up later with Dennis Kwok on another TV show who said similar things. And then everything sort of fell into place. You could see how the whole election was being played, and that the involvement of the different parties, of how they're sort of switching backwards and forwards. So I suppose about 2/3 of the way through the campaign it became rather evident that Carey would be the chosen one. The interesting play was that between John Chang and Carey in the popularity polls. Regina didn't get very far at all in that regard. But between John and Carey, it was very close, and then John sort of shot ahead. But that meant nothing.
And can I just ask you, in those interchanges you had during the election campaign, did any of those people actually specifically say, look, you know, I'd love to support you, i.e. Regina, but, you know, unfortunately we've been told we have to put our vote elsewhere?
Yes, there have been a couple of instances. But I can't actually name any of
but those
but
instances
there were a couple,
occurred,
yes.
Well, let me ask you, Charles Mok, because you were coordinating the Democrats' side of that election campaign, and I think people were quite surprised to hear that even some Democrats were approached by pro-China figures.
Well, indeed, there were a small number of us, over 300 of us, the pro-democracy, the pan-Democrat election committee members that were approached by people who are close to Beijing. Now, I do not believe that that was a very well-coordinated effort by Beijing to try to get more votes, even from our side. I think they wouldn't trust us to really switch, even if they wanted us to. But I do believe that probably a few of the other middlemen or people who are close to Beijing probably wanted to do it for their own personal credit, to try to maybe hopefully switch a couple. In the end, I don't believe that happened at all, and it wouldn't make a difference in the result anyway, because, you know, they just manipulated the whole thing so well.
But let me just ask you, because you've had experience of other elections, chief executive elections. Was there notably more intervention, as far as you can see, in this election than the election for 5 years ago?
Definitely, with the one 5 years ago, and even with the one 10 years ago, with Alan Leung and Donald Zhang. I think every time these chief executive elections, on the one hand, I think the public wants more democracy or more choices that the public hasn't been able to get. But on the other hand, I think I also see that the will of Beijing to try to control the result is actually more evident and actually more involved as well. This time compared to the last time, especially with the fact that a candidate with a lesser popularity, much lesser popularity, being elected in the end, is the first time. It never happened before with the previous, even, you know, given that they are already a very well-controlled and manipulated elections, that people can get nominated anyway. But this time, Beijing decided that they didn't have to follow public opinion at all.
Virtually on the popularity side, you had to convince the public, because theoretically, the electors are representing the public from the various sectors. So if you've got good public support, or so you would think you would, therefore they should have some bearing on the electors. It didn't work.
It didn't.
The public would be more aware of the need for universal suffrage and could put more pressure on the legislators. When it was defeated in 2015, I think that was a great mistake, personally.
The reality is, I think a lot of the members of the public that we've talked to actually told us that this is a perfect example why the package in 2015 wouldn't even help these candidates get nominated, because they couldn't get any of these nominations from the pro-establishment at all. Not enough for them to get the 500 threshold. No, sorry, that's 50%, 600 people to get them over the top in order to be nominated.
Let me ask you, Mark Pinkstone, I mean, you know, you were inside one of the campaigns, and Was the feeling there that there was more intense pressure?
I believe so. It's the first time I have ever seen anything like this. I've lived in Hong Kong for about 50 years, gone through, well, there were no elections before until the handover. But for me, this is the most blatant exercise in interference I have seen.
It seems to me there either was or there wasn't intervention. In your experience, did that happen?
Well, if you even take what some of the comments Regina has made earlier, in one interview, she tried to make a comparison between intervention and interference. Now, she was just drawing the difference. But by drawing a difference, I think she made some sort of a hint, if anything, that something was going on. I didn't ask her permission to write this article. I did that purposely. I didn't want to get her as being part of the conspiracy, if you want to use the term. I wanted to distance her from this, and that I take the full responsibility myself.
Thank you both very much indeed, and we'll be back after the break. We'll see you then. Welcome back. The average Hong Konger throws out about 1.39 kilograms of household waste each day. Each year, 6 million tons of waste goes to landfills. Thanks to our consumption-led lifestyle, municipal solid waste has increased by over 80% over the past 30 years. In 2014, the government set a target to slash that figure by 14% by 2022. One way to achieve this goal is to put a price on being wasteful.
It is going to cost more to get rid of your rubbish when proposed legislation to implement a municipal solid waste or MSW charge is implemented in 2019. According to the Environment Bureau, the aim is not to increase government revenue, but to reduce Hong Kong's solid waste by 40% by 2020. The Bureau made its plan for the charge public a few weeks ago. The bill to introduce it will be presented to the Legislative Council in the first half of this year. Under Secretary for the Environment Christine Low admits that the current draft of the bill is not perfect, but says the message is sound and clear. Everyone has to pay.
In such a complex scheme, and it's very complex because it impacts on everyone in Hong Kong. Therefore, it's very important for us to focus on the substantive part of the scheme. It doesn't mean that we're not going to work continuously on many other aspects.
The basic idea of the MSW charge is to charge by designated garbage bags. This will apply to almost every household, street-level shop and institutional building. 9 different sizes will be available, ranging from 3 to 100 litres. The charge per litre will be 11 cents. The government estimates a 4-person household will pay about $20 to $30 a month. In other instances, there will be a charge by weight at $365 to $395 per tonne. This will apply to those hiring private waste collectors to dispose of it directly at landfills or refuse transfer stations. Some restaurant owners said, in principle, they agree that food catering sectors should contribute on waste reduction. But they also feel that the upcoming levy is unfair to them because the government has yet to figure out how to deal with commercial food waste in a holistic manner.
而家暫時咧，因為政府就係冇回數呢樣嘢啊嘛，冇做廚餘嘅計劃喺我哋呢啲商場啊、屋邨嗰啲地方。如果做咧，我哋將啲分類咗佢，將啲食物咧，其實啲食物殘渣最多嘅。我哋而家咧，呢啲公共屋邨幫我哋，即係佢嗰啲承包商幫我哋整咧，一個月我哋已經俾緊咧8000蚊一個月嘅。垃圾收費到時一噸噸咁計咧，冇估計錯咧應該1萬零蚊一個月。
Tommy Zhang, legislator for the Catering Functional Constituency, says the levy will be an extra burden for his sector.
It does cost more for everybody, So as I said, it's not unusual for functional constituency members to say, well, is there something you can do for my sector? But at this stage, we do want to say to people, this is the path for the future. Let's work on how to actually get it done. Now, of course, if they're asking for some special dispensation, I prefer not to talk about that.
According to the government, some 35% of solid waste is currently recycled. Still, some recyclable or reusable items like plastic or textiles end up in landfills. Of the non-recyclable items, 33% is food waste from both commercial and domestic sectors. 3 years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Hu took part in a solid waste charge pilot program conducted by Greeners Action. For a family of 2 adults and 2 children, the mock-up waste levy bill amounted to around $100 a month. Mrs. Hu says that using designated rubbish bags, sorting recyclable items, and reducing unnecessary consumption weren't that challenging for the family. For her, handling food waste and excess packaging from supermarkets were more complex issues.
塑膠用品啦，即係啲塑膠啊嗰啲咯，即係好似你啱啱講嗰啲超級市場包裝嗰啲，我哋盡量如果可以回收得嘅都希望放翻喺度咯，可能洗一洗去沖一沖去咯。
超級市場為咗維生啦，第二樣嘢其實亦都一個包裝又可以賣高啲嘅價錢啦。咁所以兩個樣咧，我哋先要做到呢一部分呢個過多包裝呢個問題咯。咁其實過多包裝亦都牽涉到就係我哋嘅消費嘅態度，即係其實係咪我哋都要重新去即係思考下即係消費嘅態度係點咧？
All this plastic packaging we don't need, we're going to give it back to the shop.
Some green activists are advocating a controversial campaign called Trash the Checkout, asking people to dump unnecessary packaging in stores to urge them to forgo unnecessary wrapping. It's been criticized for making extra work for low-level supermarket staff who don't get to make the decisions. The group argues that if the government is following the polluter pays principle, chain stores and corporations should have to share the cost rather than just pass it on to customers.
我哋都促請政府真係盡快做一啲嘅資生產者責任制，因為佢哋好多時候咧就係為咗喺超市為咗要嘟個巴曲，所以包跟住黐個 label 落去咁樣。咁其實呢件事係好荒謬嘅。
由上一屆政府到而家呢屆政府有幾樣嘢嘅即係你中唔中意或者做得完備都好，就係膠袋啦、玻璃樽啦、電子廢物而家就嚟傾緊啦。咁跟住而家膠樽嘅顧問研究即係將會展開。咁當初承諾嘅嘢咧，大體上都慢慢上去。咁其實正如之前所講就係咧，廢物收費一出台嘅時候咧，係倒推令到呢啲更加快，因為大家覺得，咦，生產者佢有責任嘅喎，你唔係將啲責任推晒俾市民喎。
Some worry that there will also be gaps in enforcement. At this refuse collection point in Wan Chai, car tires and LPG canisters have been dumped illegally and anonymously. Lau Wei-tak, secretary for the Foreman Grade Union of the Food and Environment Hygiene Department, said that they are not sure how they will conduct inspections or prosecute with limited resources given certain unclear areas of legislation.
有好多嘢係我哋成日都講㗎啦，魔鬼係細節之中。你個大方向係垃圾徵費，但係有啲人係逃避你個繳費嘅。 佢一定用好多方法，房屋署轄下有啲街紙嘅，咁我攞咗去佢哋嗰個起貨區嗰度擺咗喺度，然之後我行開，跟住有人嚟賣，喂，先生你，我最多話，哎呀，我唔記得攞啫喎，咁我哋過咗幾日冇人嚟認領嗰啲，再睇翻去，抄翻出嚟，咦？呢啲係垃圾嚟喎，呢啲係廚餘嚟喎，佢發臭嗰陣時，我哋先知啊，原來係廚餘，咁我哋咪要變咗我哋增加我哋。
The Environment Bureau acknowledges that law enforcement could be complicated in areas such as the New Territories or on outlying islands, in buildings without property management or premises with no front gate or CCTV system. In instances like this, more illegal street-level dumping is likely to continue.
There will be a period for people to get used to, so that there could be more conversations in the community for people to understand how to do it. So we're not going to really push people to enforce the law at the early stage, and we've made that quite clear. But over time, people are going to get used to it. We've seen this in other communities. So I believe Hong Kong people are just as good as everybody else. We will get it right.
On Thursday, Chinese President Xi Jinping met the US President for the first time at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. Trade and North Korea weighed heavily on the agenda. Mr. Trump has been dropping dark hints about military action against both Syria and North Korea. Mind you, he tends to drop heavy hints all over the place. But in this case, the United States has acted by launching missiles targeting a Syrian airfield in retaliation for a chemical weapons attack that caused heavy civilian casualties. The US action came midway during the visit, where President Xi has other domestic priorities ahead of the 19th Communist Party Congress in the autumn, where he hopes to consolidate his power. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
We've had a long discussion already, and so far I have gotten nothing, absolutely nothing. But we have developed a friendship, I can see that.